Hello, YouTubers! Welcome to Big Buddha is Watching. I'm Big Buddha. The Frighteners. Film number 4 or 5, I guess, on the Jackson Marathon, depending if you count Forgotten Silver or not. This film is Jackson's foray into Hollywood movie making. Even though he shot the film entirely in New Zealand, I don't think Jackson's ever not made a film in New Zealand. I believe I'm right in saying that all his films have been shot over there. That this one was set in Northern California, and so they mocked up a town near Wellington. They found the most American-looking town, and shot the film there. And with American actors for the first time he has Michael J. Fox in this film, so instantly I'm in. Back to the Future is my favourite film, and of course Robert Zemeckis directed Back to the Future. Robert Zemeckis is another favourite filmmaker of mine, a director whose work I'm going to have to look into more in depth at one point, possibly do a marathon session on him, because he's done so. I think he doesn't really get the plaudits that he deserves, because he is seen as a commercial director, but he's a very, very technically accomplished director, and certainly done a lot in a lot of revolutionary stuff, especially with regards to state of the art special effects at the time. What's interesting about this is the Robert Zemeckis connection, in that this was originally pitched. I'm going to get this story right, because it's slightly different from how I understood it until I looked at the special features on the DVD. I always was led to believe that this was originally written as what was supposed to be a Tales from the Crypt movie. Robert Zemeckis produced the Tales of the Crypt TV show, and at the time he was trying to get feature films made. I think there were a couple of Tales from the Crypt feature films released theatrically, sort of low budget fare. And I always understood that this was written at the intention to be a Tales from the Crypt movie, and then once the script was written, Zemeckis read it and said, no, this is actually better than a Tales from the Crypt movie. This deserves to be a proper feature, so we're going to get you a proper feature release budget to direct this, and I'll executive produce it. Jackson, you direct it. That wasn't quite the case. What actually happened was that when Fran Walsh and Peter Jackson were writing Heavenly Creatures, and they were bogged down in this very heavy stuff, heavy subject matter, true life subject matter. What they did to unwind and amuse themselves was tell each other ghost stories, and from that, a desire to do a light-hearted ghost story movie, and for Jackson to do something with ghosts. Before that he'd done an alien movie, he'd done a zombie movie, and a puppet movie, of course. So ghosts seemed the next logical step in subject matter. So they decided they wanted to do a ghost story, and they concocted this story. And then around the same time, prior to Heavenly Creatures coming out, they were invited over to Hollywood by Zemeckis to pitch ideas for the Tales of the Crypt film. They pitched their idea, which they hadn't conceived as a Tales from the Crypt movie. And Zemeckis really liked the idea and said, I'm on board, and I want you to develop this as a proper feature, because he didn't think it was quite right for Tales from the Crypt. I think it could have worked as a Tales from the Crypt story. So that's initially how this story, this film got off the ground. Um, it's interesting at the time, when you think about what the could have beens, for the starting point for Jackson's Hollywood career. Because looking at his early work, it was obvious that Hollywood was going to come calling, and like I said, right from it back in my bad taste review, the first thing that struck me with when I saw that was, wow, give this guy a budget and let's see what he could do. I guess this is the fulfillment of that. This is what this guy Jackson can do with a budget. Make a very entertaining film. I'll just talk briefly about the could have beens, because I've only just literally like 5 minutes ago looked this up to confirm it, because I always had it. I remember hearing something at some point about there was a possibility of Jackson doing a Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy Krueger movie. It was actually around the time they were making A Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare, I believe that one was. But he actually was approached about that. This was just after Meet the Feebles, so he was still a low budget filmmaker, hadn't done Brain Dead at the time, so he wasn't really that tried and tested. But apparently him and Danny Mulleran, who he co-wrote Meet the Feebles with, wrote a screenplay for let's get it right. I keep wanting to say Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street 6. I mention it only briefly because that's one of the great could have beens in my view, because I truly believe if Jackson had been given free reign and creative freedom and been allowed to write and direct a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, I believe we would have got the greatest Nightmare on Elm Street movie ever made. I mean, literally, like the best one there is out there, even better than the original. I think what Jackson would have brought to it would have been he would have brought two things that would have made a great movie. Where 80s monster horror movies in the vein of The Nightmare on Elm Street, Hellraiser, Halloween, Friday the 13th. I think where they fall down is that the monster's always more interesting than the human characters. The human characters tend to be one-dimensional, and I think if Jackson would have brought anything to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, it would have been engaging human characters, just as engaging as Freddy Krueger, and also a man of Jackson's imagination and just the sheer number of ideas that he has in all his films, that just constantly churning out new idea, fresh idea. I mean, Jackson has more ideas in 20 minutes of one of his films than a lot of filmmakers have in the whole runtime of theirs. What he would have done with the concept of the dream world and characters going in and out of the dream world, and also being allowed to make an R-rated movie with practical effects. The Jackson that made Brain Dead, being allowed by Hollywood to do a gore-fest movie with Freddy Krueger. I think it would have been something to behold, but hey ho, it never happened. I mentioned the R-rated thing as well, which is interesting because this was supposed to be a PG-13 12A film, and he actually designed it as such. I mean, you could criticize and say that was really a bid for commercial success. But I think that's doing Jackson a disservice, because because saying, the guy who did Bad Taste and Brain Dead, oh, he's now doing something light, what could be perceived as lightweight, and he's had the reins put on himself. He's selling out. Well, that would suggest that all Jackson had to offer within his early films was gore and splatter and R-rated material, and there was nothing else there. No, I don't buy that. A man of his talent can turn his hand to more lightweight fare and make something just as entertaining in the PG-13 realm as in the R-rated realm. However, funnily enough, it was not meant to be, because although they made the film, it didn't have any bad language in, and had a little bit of violence, mild violence, but very little gore in it. What gore there is kind of cartoonish in nature, but the film did actually end up getting an R rating. Apparently it's down to the fact that the film, there is a tonal shift in the film. It starts out as a comedy, and then halfway through it becomes more of an intense thriller horror movie. And you also have these two villains who are a Bonnie and Clyde / Natural Born Killers-esque couple, except the twist here is that what the fella's dead. He went to the electric chair, so he's a ghost. But his girlfriend at the time has grown up, so she's now a middle-aged woman. But she's I'm getting again. I'm getting into spoiler territories, because there's some, for those of you who haven't seen it, there's some reveals about that in the last act. I probably already spoiled too much, but basically at the core of this, you have this sort of natural born killers, serial killing couple. They go on a rampage. You sort of see this in old news footage in the film. Again, Jackson's shot this old news footage. He was used to mucking up old footage at this point, black and white footage, grainy footage from shooting Forgotten Silver. So he brought that sort of skill set over. But I think it was obviously a contentious issue at the time. There was the Natural Born Killers. I mean, people forget sort of around 94, 95 when Natural Born Killers was out, and Tarantino was emerging, and screen violence was on the uprise. And of course, there was a lot of concern about this. There were some copycat killings from Natural Born Killers, and I'm not going to get into a debate now on screen violence and who's at fault there, but there was a lot of worry in the air about screen violence and serial killer characters, and I think that the feeling at the time was to have two serial killers in a light-hearted comedy was too much for 13-year-olds at the time. So that's why the film got an R rating, and it sadly damaged the film's successes at the box office. I don't actually know whether this film did badly flop. Oh well, it had a budget of 26 million and it made 29.3 million. So there you go. Not a great success, certainly, but nevertheless, it's gained a cult following over the years, and it led obviously Jackson, so those that did see in the industry, sat up and took notice of Jackson, and of course, his next film was Lord of the Rings, so it still didn't damage his career at all. I think when the film got an R rating, the studio panicked, and they said, because it was originally meant to be a Halloween movie, and at the time, sort of 1996, R-rated Halloween movies just weren't doing very well. Around the time of Halloween, and just wasn't. It was felt that there wasn't a public appetite for it, so they moved the release dates back from Halloween to summer and tried to release it as a fun summer movie. And of course, it was a gamble that didn't pay off. I think it's a real shame, because if you remember, sort of around Halloween 1996. Was there any big Hollywood film horror movies that came out? Yes, Scream 1 came out, and it was an R-rated horror movie, and people my age went to see it in their droves and absolutely lapped it up. So I think there is an alternate timeline where they just didn't make this one decision, this one knee-jerk reaction to getting, and they stuck to the guns and released this as an R-rated movie around Halloween, and it caught the imagination, and people would have gone to see it as a horror movie, and would have probably been a much bigger hit at the time. It's certainly promoted now heavily as a horror movie, rather. I mean, that doesn't tonally, this film, it kind of makes me a little nostalgic, because you don't really get the light-hearted, goofy horror movies anymore. I think it's a subgenre that is ripe for reinvention now. Tonally, this film, it's in the sort of same vein as films like Ghostbusters, and Ghostbusters 2 in particular, Beetlejuice, Haunted Honeymoon, High Spirits, and films like is it The Haunted Mansion with Eddie Murphy? I guess that was probably the death nail in the coffin of the goofy horror movie, PG-13, or what was intended to be the PG-13 movie, horror movie. I haven't talked about the plot. Yeah, so what this film is about is you have Michael J. Fox. He plays Frank Bannister in the film. He is someone who a few years prior to the start of the film, him and his wife were in a car accident. His wife was killed, and but he survived, and he went through this major trauma. And as a result of this trauma, he can now see the dead, so it cut forward a few years, and he's living in this dilapidated house that he's building himself, but it's taken him ages to fix, and he makes a living. You think he promotes himself as a psychic investigator, someone who rids poltergeist of from people's houses, but you find out that he's actually a con man. He's got 3 ghost friends who live with him. Stuart, a kind of nerdy one, and then you have the judge, played by Sean Astin's dad. So there's the Lord of the Rings connection there, and She McBride as Cyrus, who's a ghost that died in the 70s. So he's got the afro and the pimp suit, and the judge is obviously an old gunslinger from the Old West. He's sort of past his prime. You see in one shot that he's basically an upper body but then just the spine down to his legs. Um, that sort of. I mean, you could see Jackson's thumbprints on this in the kind of wacky humour and the treatment of the ghosts. It's very much his kind of humour. You get this isn't Ghost, you know. The It doesn't follow the same rules and logics. There seems to be absolutely no logic to the way the ghosts work in these films. You know, they can like fall through the floor at a whim, even though they can walk on it and fly through the sky, and they'll go through a door, but they'll get stuck for some reason, and the ghost has to pull them, and they can stretch and they can get sucked into fans and chopped up and blown out through an exhaust. They can get fly spray in the face, which makes the face melt. So you have the Michael J. Fox, the Frank Barrister character, and then also you have people dying in this town, sort of seemingly healthy people dying from what look like heart attacks, but when the coroner opens up, it transpires that the heart's been crushed by some malevolent force, and then about sort of the end of the first act, you find out that there's a Grim Reaper character appearing that only Frank can see, and he's crushing the life out of people's hearts. So you get this is another screenplay from Jackson and Fran Walsh, and again, like his other films, expertly structured. You get all this set up in the first act, and then boy, do you have a payoff in Act 2 and Act 3. Jackson really goes to town and throws like in every film he makes. It's everything but the kitchen sink from Act 2 onwards. You have. Too many things to count. You have the judge and his guns. Apparently there's ghost guns in this world. He keeps going to a cemetery, and Arlie Ermy from Full Metal Jacket is there as a drill sergeant. He runs the place. He's got ghost guns, and he keeps everyone in line. Just ideas after idea after idea. Great, good performances throughout. Like I say, Michael J. Fox, one of my favourite actors. I watched Back to the Future so much. When you watch something a lot, when you're younger, it's always odd when you see the actors that you've watched a lot in different things, because they'll fall back on the same tics and the same facial expressions and the same movements, and it always reminds you of the thing that you've watched over and over again. And so, although this is a very different character from Marty McFly, this isn't a young innocent. This is almost like the polar opposite of Marty McFly. He's kind of this is a very jaded, cynical character. He's actually a bit of an asshole at first. He does stuff like the Stuart the nerdy character thinks he's going to be sick, but he actually wills him on to be sick, just to be an asshole, and then a typical Jackson moment. The Stuart's going to be sick, and he holds his mouth shut, and the vomit shoots out through his ears. But he's good. He's good. You get Trini Alvarado as Dr. Lucy Linsky, not Lewinsky, Linsky, and yes, she's named after Melanie Linsky. Very solid performance from her. Dee Wallace Stone, who's probably I believe she was in The Howling, which I've never seen, but a film I want to see. A Joe Dante werewolf movie. You know, it's a film I've been meaning to seek out for years. And of course, she's most famous for being the mum in E.T., but she plays Patricia, the woman I mentioned earlier, and of course, Jake Busey is he plays Charles Bartlett, the the male counterpart of the serial killer twosome, and you get Jeffrey Combs. Who's Jeffrey Combs? He's Reanimator. He is another horror icon, because Reanimator's a great horror movie. It's I mentioned it in the Brain Dead review. It's kind of second to Brain Dead in just what a bloodbath it is, and but one of the things that makes the that film, as well as it being a good story, you know, H.P. Lovecraft, you know, a sort of very much a black comedy, but at the centre of that you get this wonderfully sinister performance from Jeffrey Combs. One of my favourite sort of acting styles is actors who can do comedic and sinister in equal measures, and Jeffrey Combs is like this. He's kind of, if anyone knows the British comic actor Kevin Eldon, Jeffrey Combs very much feels like an American version of him. When you watch the special features, you know, very charming. It seems like a really nice fella in really like real life, real smart fella. But for some reason, you get in films you get polar opposites when you get personalities sort of both behind and in front of the camera, and for some reason, like the nicest people often and make the best movie villains, and vice versa. You know, I'm sure the worst people make the best heroic actors. But Jeff Combs is just as entertaining in this as he is in Reanimator. He plays a character who he's after Bannister. Basically, he's basically gone a bit mad because he's been infiltrating cults all his life. He tried to infiltrate the Manson cult, and it's alluded to. He's got a swastika on his hand, and it turns out he was their sex slave, and he's just been in and out of these cults over the years and in disguise, and it's warped his sensibility and turned him into a bit of a fascist. He actually has like his haircut is modelled on Hitler, and but you get these wonderfully funny moments where he just he just for some reason just keeps pulling stuff out of thin air that you wouldn't expect. Like he's got this suit on, but he says he's impervious to psychic ability because he pulls open his shirt and he's got a breast lead plate on, which you would blatantly see under his suit, but you know, it's one of these cut jokes, you know, and it's a lead lined breastplate, but he's got nipples on it as well. And then at another point he pulls a gun out of his pocket, but it's not a gun that would fit in his pocket. Is an Uzi, you know, and it's like, well, where the hell did you conceal this that from? And the character's got hemorrhoids, you know, another great caricature trait. So yeah, I mean, this film, like I say, it really builds throughout the film, and they really layer in the plot points, and there's imagination to spare. Some of the jokes seem a little childish, and I mean, there's a bit where the judge leaps into a mummy sarcophagus in a museum, and he starts humping it, and then you see his head come up, and he says, "Oh, I love it when they lie still like that. You think, oh, really? You really went there, you know? Yeah, but I guess this Jackson's still trying to point out that he is still that childish bad taste, the guy who made Bad Taste. Yeah, but I mean, it really builds, and like so much so to the point that I remember originally watching this, I probably was about 17 when I first saw this film, and it took me. This was before you could go on the internet and look up who directed what with great ease, and so it took me a while to realise that. The Peter Jackson that directed this film was the same guy that directed Bad Taste. It took me a while to realise that, and when I did, it's like, of course, and answer my question, that this is what this guy can do with a budget, it made sense to me when I discovered they were both Jackson, because they both have that sense of build up and payoff at the end, but not just payoff. Jackson really sort of rinses every ounce of story and every ounce of creativity and just fun ideas throughout the film. I mean, there's a bit where Frank has an out of body experience, and I remember thinking that was the end of the film. I mean, it seemed like it seemed like, oh, this would be a natural place to wrap up, and I think it really is where most films would wrap up. But really, that's just the beginning of the third act. There's a whole third act that follows on, where there's further revelations about the Reaper, and then you get further revelations about Dee Wallace's character, and then it all comes to a head in a hospital shootout, and then there's more imaginative ideas. It's not just they turn up where the end shootout is going to happen, and it's all resolved neatly. Now you've got all these different threads with Danvers, the Jeffrey Combs character comes in, so you have to have resolution with him. Imaginative touches where Michael J. Fox keeps slipping in and out of time. He keeps on going back to the 60s or the 70s where the original massacre happened, and those sort of shots really remind me of Back to the Future and the special effects work in that. Just in Michael J. Fox is the one of the movie's great time traveller actors, and so it's great that he gets to do it in this film. Okay, I think we're coming to the end of this video, but I think I'm going to go on because I've got a little bit more to say, so I'll see you in the next one.